I'm Alex Waller, Chief Fire Officer. I've been Chief Fire Officer since October 22, that's just over a year ago, and I've been at Cheshire Fire for over 30 years. To join the fire service was, it was always the ambition. It really was. You know, you get kids who really want to join the fire service, and I was one of those kids. I remember vividly the fire engine coming, not to me primary school, to me infant school, so I must have been 6 or 7. I remember the fire engine coming, they did the stuff, they went, and then I painted a picture. And I painted a picture of the fire engine, the hoses and everything. And my mum kept that picture, and she kept it. She still had it when she died a few years ago. I've got it now. That picture, and from that day, I was going to join the fire service. As I've said, it was my ambition to be in the fire service. And when I got to 15, I went to Widnes Fire Station on work experience from school for 2 weeks, and it was brilliant. And then it was even more, I was even more determined this is what I was going to do. And then I come to the end of my senior school, and the teacher sat me down and said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "I'm going to be in the fire service." He said, "What if you don't get in?" I said, "I'll get in." And he said, "You need a backup plan." So he convinced me that I was going to do these A-levels. So I stayed on, and I stayed on at college doing the A-levels. And I did it for a bit, but my heart wasn't really in it. And to be honest, I was a bit skint at the time. In fact, I was that skint, there was just not a chance I was going to finish college. There was not a chance I was going to go on to university. So it just wasn't going to happen. And what happened is, some of my mates who had been my kind of circle of friends were working on a building site in Widnes, building a new road. And they said, "There's jobs going." And in the end, I took the plunge. You know, my teacher was right. I should have had a backup plan, but I went and I got a job on the building site. Fantastic time. And then I was waiting for the job to come up, and I knew that they did an apprentice firefighter scheme. You could join at 17. I was waiting for that to come up, and I was going to apply, and then I applied for it. I actually got my application form, because you couldn't go on the internet then and download the form. You had to get a hard copy. I remember my boxing trainer at the time, he knew a firefighter, and he got me the form. I come up to the club, he said, "Yeah," got the form, filled it in, took it home, and sent it off. And then I went through all the process, all the stages, and eventually got in and became an apprentice firefighter. And then a year after that, I went to Birchwood with my first station. That's my first posting. I was 18 years old, and I'd done it. You know, that was the ambition at 18 achieved. That's all I ever wanted to do, and I'd done it, and I was over the moon. It's the best job in the world, best time in terms of the service. It really was. I loved it. I loved being a firefighter, and as I say, that's all I ever wanted. That was 30 years ago. So since then, I've been in all different roles in Cheshire, all different parts of Cheshire. I did eventually go back to school or college, did my master's degree, did other qualifications, got lots of experience doing some major projects, and really just tried to, I always say this to people as well, I always see myself, and I still do, as a work in progress. You know, it's kind of just keep learning, keep getting experiences, keep getting better, and keep going. And that's what I've always tried to do, and that's what I've done in every role I've been in. I've always worked my hardest, tried to get as much of it as I can out of it. And then eventually, I got to Assistant Chief in 2018, and Deputy Chief a couple of years after, and then eventually Chief Fire Officer, and that was definitely the proudest day of my life. You know, being in the service has got, for so long, has got lots of advantages, some disadvantages in terms of, you know, sometimes you can't see things that, you know, other people might see, but I know the service, I know the culture in the service, and when I became chief, I made it very clear I had 2 main priorities. The first priority was to provide a top-notch fire and rescue service and serve the public and save lives, because that's what we're here for. My second priority was to serve the staff and make sure they've got what they need to do the job, and make sure they've got an inclusive place to work, make sure they've got a voice and they feel valued, and they feel a sense of belonging. And for the last year, or just over, I've been working hard to try and achieve those kind of main priorities. We've made a lot of progress, and I'm really looking forward to next year making some more progress. The thing with Cheshire Fire is it's this sense of belonging at the fire service, at Cheshire Fire in particular. And that belonging comes from people who feel like they're connected to a shared vision, a purpose. There's a purpose here. They feel like they are treated fairly. These things matter. And if you've got that kind of belonging, the culture is really positive, and that's why the culture at Cheshire Fire is so positive, because people do feel that, some people will say, it feels a bit like a family. It's definitely felt like a family to me for 30 years, and I understand that. I know what they mean when they say that. It really does feel like a family, and that connection, even long after you've gone from Cheshire Fire, people still feel that connection. They still feel they've got a place here, and they'll always be welcome here. I think for the long-term plans for the service is, and my approach in the last year really, working with staff, working with members, has been to look at the service and say, you know what, we do loads of things really well. What things can we change for the right reason that will help us get better? So that thing about having better response, having more prevention and more protection, that kind of drive, that's where we want to go to. That's all being born out of this reflection back on the service, working with staff, working with members. And that's kind of where we're heading. And what we'll do is we'll sign off the 4-year plan in February. We'll move down that road. But what we'll always do is keep our options open, because we need to learn as we go. We need to then adapt, and then we need to change. So it's kind of an iterative thing. So we've got clarity now about where we're heading, and what we'll do is we'll get there. I truly believe if we implement what's in the current plans, we will definitely have better response, more prevention, more protection, and that's what's going to keep people safe. That's what's going to save lives and keep firefighters safe as well. So I'm convinced that's the right plan for Cheshire. We talk about how things change, and you only have to look back. So I remember a time, you're talking 20 odd years ago, I was a trainer in the training department, and we were looking at new procedures and equipment for breathing apparatus. And what had happened is there was an incident in Blaine and in Gwent in which 2 firefighters lost their lives searching for a child. Then there was an incident the same year with a female firefighter, the first female firefighter to die in peacetime on duty in Britain. And these all happened in quick succession, and we had other incidents happen. And what happened is the sector then, this awareness, looked and said, we need to do something about this. And what followed, and as I had the privilege of being part of the training department at the time when we was looking at this stuff, is it was followed about we will now move to a more scientific approach to how we deal with fires, a more technical approach. We taught firefighters about flashovers and backdrafts, about how to apply water, gas cooling, different techniques. We provided different BA sets, different equipment, thermal image cameras, positive pressure ventilation to be able to move fire gases through a compartment. So there's a massive shift in the sector. And that shift then means that today, firefighters who join take it for granted. They think this is how we've always done it. We haven't. We've moved on. We've moved on with equipment, procedures, and that's the kind of philosophy you need throughout the fire and rescue service. You need to change and adapt to what goes on to reduce risk, and that's what we do. The same thing happened with road traffic collisions. When I joined the service, and actually before my time, from the stories some of the older firefighters used to tell me, the equipment was so primitive for how you would cut people out of cars, and it was so primitive, and yet again early 20 odd years ago, we then shifted to, we've now got equipment that can tons of pressure cutting through vehicles. We can cut around a person if they're in a vehicle. You can leave them in the chair and take them to the hospital in the chair if we have to. We can literally cut the car to bits. We've got the equipment, the procedures. We've changed how we do it in terms of the team approach, where casualty-centred approach. You know, all of these things, kinematics, all of these things is about adapting and changing and developing and progressing. So the history shows me where you get them step changes, and what we need to be aware of is, as these new risks come on the horizon, what's the next step change we need to adapt to that, to adjust. And we're in a really good position. What has always been the case in Cheshire, always, is we provide the best training, the best equipment, the best vehicles for our firefighters. We always have and we always will. And the reason for that is because that's what keeps them safe. And if they're safe, the public are safe. So the Fire Authority is always committed to that and always will be. Now, it's difficult at times, but we need to keep making sure we're on top of our game. Standout incidents, well, in 30 years there's been a lot. Some of them been really difficult. Some of them have been literally, you know, affected the service, the individual in the service, you know, massively. You know, changed how they work. You know, they've been so significant, and I say there's lots and lots of incidents. I think the one for me that jumps out, which is relatively recent, was the explosion at Bosley Mill. That explosion happened, it was a July back in 2015, just after 9 o'clock, and an explosion ripped through that mill and the site. And I remember, well, vividly arriving on that day, because I arrived after all the initial attendances had arrived and took over command later in the day. And when I got there and I saw what the crews had faced when they got there, you know, a 4-storey building flattened, silos that would either come down or still burning, kerosene, running fuel fires, leaking, you know, 40 or so people injured or received treatment, you know, 4 people still missing in the wreckage, and people searching for them. And we had at the scene, you know, fire and rescue services from all over the country, urban search and rescue teams, all of the partners in Cheshire, the blue light services, the local authorities, and we all had a plan about how we were going to deal with that incident, try and find the casualties. And I remember thinking what those initial attendance crews must have faced when they got there, and they did an amazing job in very difficult circumstances that day. But the incident went on to be the longest incident we've ever had, as long as incident I can remember. It was over a month in length. So there's a lot happened during that time. And you know, it was tragic. We couldn't save the 4 people, but we did everything we could. And what I'm absolutely confident is that the emergency responders that day, the way they responded to it, you know, that was a masterclass in emergency response and multi-agency partnership working, not just locally but across the fire sector as well. So, but as I say, tragically we couldn't save the people. I just wish we could. Now, there is one part of that job that stands out because it kind of sums up Cheshire Fire. And it was only a small part of that major incident, but it was a significant part. What we had is, on the scene, you had a silo, and this was a massive silo. You know, it was 100 feet high, you know, 30 feet wide, full hundreds of tons of wood dust. This is the same wood dust that's been involved in an explosion. It's on fire and it's burning while all the crews and all the responders are trying to work to find people. And it's there in the background, and we needed to deal with it. And I remember I was head of service delivery at the time, so I was responsible for the coordination of the incident actually throughout afterwards, because I was head of the operational part of the service. And I remember saying, we need to deal with it. How are we going to do it? And we looked at all of the normal ways you would deal with a silo. Can we get water into it? Can we use compressed air foam? Can we use bulk carbon dioxide? And we looked at all different ways of dealing with it. And we ruled them all out because they weren't safe in the context of what was going on, because the incident was still going on. So in the end, we ended up looking all over the world. We were literally searching for techniques to deal with it. And we found something in Sweden. And they said a technique using nitrogen to, in effect, flood it with nitrogen, that would then starve the fire of oxygen, and it put the fire out to the extent that you could then empty the content out safely without the risk of dust explosion. So we started thinking, we'll give it a go. And we ended up downloading a manual. Now this is a procedure, it's never been done in the UK. It only really gets done in Sweden in fixed installations on fixed sites. It's not something you do at remote places, at fires. But we said, we'll do it. And I remember walking into a fabricator's in Congleton with a scrap of paper with these lances that we'd drawn. And the lances are a couple of metres long. You had the pipe connected at one end where you connected the nitrogen inlet, if you like. And then it had holes in the pipe. And you had a big spike on it. And you pushed it in, drilled a hole in the side of the silo, pushed it into the wood product, and then pushed in the nitrogen and saturated it. And you had 3 of these lances on different sides, and 1 in the roof. And I said to the guy, can you make us these? And fair dues, he went away, he come back, he said, I can sort that for you. And he did. And we get the lances, and then we're thinking, where are we going to get the nitrogen from? So we phoned round a few places and we said, can you provide us some nitrogen? What do you want it for? We want to put a fire out. Well, we've never done that before. It's all right, trust us, we'll be all right. So we ended up getting this bulk tanker. Now, bearing in mind, nitrogen gas is a cryogenic liquid when it's a liquid. You're talking minus 200. This stuff has to come out of the tanker into a manifold, into a gas, and then into the silo. And we set all this up on a site that was a wreckage. We set it all up, got the bulk tanker in, we pumped in the nitrogen gas, and we put sensors, gas sensors all through the silo. And then we monitored to see if the combustion had reduced, and it did. And it took us days, and it reduced to the extent that we could then empty it safely, and that's exactly what we did. Now that was just one small part in that major incident. But what it did, it showed, in terms of Cheshire Fire, being innovative, pushing the boundary, and doing whatever it takes to get the job done, whatever it takes. And we did that, and it was a success. There's experience of actually dealing with incidents and experience of what caused incidents, and then you get into, well, how do we stop that? And Bosley was a really good example of we did the best emergency response you could ask for, but it was never going to save those 4 people. The only way to save those 4 people was to stop the incident. And that's why we spend so much time and effort in Cheshire trying to prevent incidents from happening in the first place. That's what we try and do. And that's why it's important, because we can have the best response in the world, but we won't save everyone unless we stop the incidents. I always say the same thing to new recruits and people joining the service is, if you want to be a firefighter for your whole career, well, we need you. Because we need good firefighters who've got experience, who really want to be firefighters. Not everybody needs to be a manager. Not everybody wants to be a manager. We need really good firefighters. But if you do want to succeed, and you do want to get on, I always say, just see yourself as a work in progress. Challenge yourself, put yourself in positions and put yourself out there. And always do your job and a little bit more. always do a little bit more, because that shows that you drive and learn, I said, and you treat yourself as a work in progress. And I always say this as well. If I look back to a year ago and ask myself, am I a better leader? Am I a better manager than I was 12 months ago? For the last 30 years, the answer has always been yes. Because that's what you need to do. You're never there. You keep getting better, keep learning, keep progressing. And that's what I say to everybody who wants to get on in the fire service. You have to think about what we do around here when you talk about culture. What do we do? I ask people this all the time, what do we do around here? And they say, we save lives. And then we say, what about the vision? What's the vision? And then they say, oh yeah. And our vision is a Cheshire where there's no deaths, no injuries, no damage from fires and other emergencies. That's no deaths, no injuries, no damage from fires and other emergencies. And we know we'll never achieve that. But that's the thing that drives us every day. That's where we're heading. That's the purpose. And when people dedicate large parts of their life to that purpose, that takes a special kind of dedication. That takes a special kind of person. And Cheshire Fire is filled with those people. And that's why the culture is so positive, so strong in Cheshire Fire, because that's the type of people that work here. And this sense of belonging at Cheshire Fire, this, say people call it a family, this is about that shared purpose, shared values, shared beliefs. That's what brings people together. And that's what makes Cheshire Cheshire. And I think for me, in terms of the culture, we're in a really strong place at the minute. And I think going forward, we're going to get even better in terms of the culture.